Hey there, Expeditioners. It's Peter here, founder of Expedition Money, and I want to tell you a story today. This is a tough story for me to tell because I'm living it. And basically, what I want to share with you is what I look back on as a regret because it was, to me, clearly the biggest career mistake that I have ever made. And once you make a mistake like I did, you can't go back and change it. You can triage what you can and try to adapt and fix things. But there are just times when you make a decision and it puts you on a path and that path diverges to some place. And if you ever want to get back to the other path, you just either don't have the same access or you can maybe nudge it, but it's never going to be quite the same thing. And a lot of this is luck. There's sometimes some foresight. But for me, I wanted to share with you this story because I actually mentored some students from my alma mater, and the insights that I gave them were originally from this. And I shared some tidbits from it, but I didn't really go into it in detail. But I want to give you the long, drawn out thing here. And depending on where you are in your career, this may or may not be relevant for you. If you're late in your career, it's certainly probably going to be less relevant. But if you're pretty early on in your career, if you find yourself in your 20s, this could be very relevant for you. If you find yourself in college still and you haven't taken a job, this could be very relevant for you. But basically, I want to tell you the story here, and I want to give you all the thinking that went into it, because it wasn't just kind of like arbitrary decisions that I made that ended up leading me down a particular path. And should I say I have no regret? Maybe not, because some good things came out of it. But in general, I think I made some pretty bad decisions based on the information I had, and even given what I thought was pretty good counseling at the time that I ignored. Let me get to it. I took the wrong job out of college. Absolutely, unequivocally, 100%. I am convinced that I took the wrong job. Now, I'm actually going to share with you real numbers as much as I can find them, and real company names. And this is not to slam any company or anything like that. And in fact, the only company names I'm going to share with you are the ones that I kind of regret not going to, because the companies that I regret going to, the names wouldn't mean anything to you anyway. All right, so let's fast tracking the story, and so I can get to some of the issues that it caused. So I was in college. I wasn't a great student by any means, and I had very average grades. But what I did have going for me was that I was entrepreneurial, and that kind of is something that's been a thread throughout my life. And I was able to start a business with a couple of my friends in one case, and we sold it. And then after that, me and my buddy actually started another business, and we did that for cash flow so that we could get through our final years of college. It wasn't really to sell or anything like that, but it was actually to give us some money, because neither of us came from rich families. We didn't come from poor families or anything like that, but there were just limits to what we could have. And when you go to private university like Northwestern University, which tends to draw a lot of high achievers and people from families of high achievers and people that tend to be very wealthy, and I met a lot of people who were not just wealthy, but blow your mind wealthy. I even remember talking to a guy who was spending his spring break on his family's yacht. And I said, "Oh, that's cool." And he mentioned that he was going to the Caribbean to do that. And I said, "Oh, so your yacht's out in the Caribbean?" He said, "No, it's actually in the Mediterranean right now. So it's getting put on a boat to get shipped to the Caribbean." So that's the scale of money that we're talking about here. But anyway, so once I got to the interviewing process in my senior year and was interviewing for jobs, I got a couple of offers. I got two main offers. It's only really two offers that were really worth anything. There was an offer that was sales, and I didn't really want to get into that. One was for a very small startup company, and under a dozen people. They only had 5 or 6 before the class that they were recruiting from was going to start. And the other company was Chase. And at the time, it was Chase Card Services. I actually don't think that's what they went by. I can't remember exactly the name, but it was Chase Bank, and they wanted to get into credit cards. And this was the late 90s, so this was 1999, okay? So the dollars I'm going to give you are actually the dollars that were offered to me, and they are $1999. I don't know what they would translate to today. But I got 2 job offers, one from a very small local consulting company here in Chicago, which is where I went to school, and then one from Chase that wanted to expand their credit card portfolio, and they were recruiting fairly heavily for people that had some entrepreneurial skills to go out and acquire some of the smaller credit card issuers or to build that business. They weren't really sure how they were going to do it, and so that's how I actually got my foot in the door there. The difference there was that this business was based in Wilmington, Delaware, which is right outside Philadelphia, but because of Delaware's very favorable laws, I think relative to taxes for a financial services company, they base themselves in Wilmington. So a lot of people live in Philadelphia. They actually flew me out there. I had a limousine, stayed in this awesome hotel in Center City. I don't even remember where it was. Just wine and dine. It was a really awesome recruiting process and a tough job to turn down. All right. What I want to share with you is that between the two job offers, the one here in Chicago paid $47,200. So $47,000. The other job offer paid $58,000, over $10,000 more. And actually at the time, I was trying to figure out how much is it worth it? I've got my friends here. I graduated with some buddies. I've made friends here in Chicago. I know Chicago. I even went out to Philadelphia. A friend of mine from high school was actually out there, so I got to hang out with her a little bit and see the city, and it was a nice city, but it wasn't like my hometown. You're just a tourist at that point. But went to their offices, spent a day out there, met people, loved it. Chase had some fantastic offices even back then. The other thing that was a factor in the compensation was that Chase at that time had a 5% bonus target for me, an annual incentive plan. I don't think they called it that, but the consulting company that I went to had no target, but no cap on bonuses either. As a new hire, what do you think of? You always think you're going to get the unlimited bonus. So I didn't even think about that. That in the Chase world, what I didn't realize is that there's a target bonus. They're trying to pay you out that additional 5%, which would have been probably only about $800 or whatever it is on $58,000. So it didn't seem like a ton to me. And then you hear, hey, on this side of things, there could be an unlimited bonus. And so you're like, oh, geez. Honestly, in my mind at that time, I don't know, for whatever reason, I had $10,000 in my mind. And maybe that was the differential, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, between the two salaries. Oh, I could take this lower paying job, but I might make up that whole salary gap in bonus. Actually, probably was a factor. The funny thing is, when I was taking this, I consulted my father on this, and he was like, take the job with Chase. They're established, they're bigger, it's going to be a better work experience. You're going to get more insights into how big businesses work. They're paying you a bunch more. At the time, it was actually very cheap to fly Southwest. You could get flights for $160 at the time round trip. And he's like, you could take the extra money you're making at Chase and fly every weekend back to Chicago and see your buddies. I didn't think that was going to be something I would want to do. Then you're crashing on couches. That's not particularly cool. It doesn't really work out like that because you have to pay taxes on some of that money anyway. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to just move somewhere and then hold on to my friends somewhere else and not make any friends in the new place. And for all these reasons, for all these kind of selfish reasons and not embracing discomfort and not pushing myself outside my own comfort zone, I decided not to take the Chase job, the Chase card services, the Chase credit card building services. And in fact, the guy I would have reported to was actually from another credit card company, a very small credit card company that had been acquired by Chase on kind of their path to building their credit card services. And so what a great guy. I can't remember his last name, but his first name was Ian. And honestly, I would have really loved working for him. There was nothing about the job, the company, or the location that turned me off about working there. It was all about my fear of leaving what I knew, my comfort zone in Chicago with a handful of my friends there, and not taking a job that would leave me in the Midwest where I felt comfortable. So that's why I did it. Those were all of the things that I was thinking about. And then on top of that, I had this delusion of, hey, I'll make up the money in the bonus at this little consulting company. A couple things that I forgot about or didn't know at the time, because you probably wouldn't know about this, is that when you go to a big company and you have an annual incentive plan target, your target bonus is never going to be smaller than that. With pay increases, obviously 5% is more on a bigger salary. But as you get promotions, your target bonuses will go from 5 to 10 to 20 to 40% to 50%. They can go to 100%. They go to 300% depending on the roles you're at. And so those are basically not salary because you can't guarantee them. But even in lean years, when I've been at big companies, if they're not going to pay out 100% of that bonus, maybe they pay out 80% or 60%. So maybe you're not getting it all. But in a small company, when they say we don't have any restrictions around bonus, what it comes down to is whatever the owners feel like. And especially in a small company, that can be very stark. Some good years, some bad years, some lean years. And in fact, I will tell you what, that 5% target bonus on my first year salary at Chase would have probably been about, let's call it $3,000, $2,800. And so I probably would have gotten that. My first bonus at the small company was $400. Honestly, I was thinking it was going to be thousands of dollars. It was $400. So it was a fraction of what it would have been at the big company. Now, I didn't know that at the time, but in retrospect, that makes sense. And it's obvious to people who are hearing about that. On top of that, you have maybe longevity and security issues at a small company that you don't at a big company. You have promotion abilities or a promotion path or an advancement path at a big company that you don't at a smaller company. Okay. So one thing I screwed up on is I had a starting salary at this company and I had a higher starting salary by quite a bit. I guess it was almost 20% more starting salary. So what we forget is this initial pay differential, right? The other big difference here is the prestige. Call it respect, reputation, whatever. But at a small company that no one's heard of versus a big company that people have heard of, regardless of it's well-loved or whatever, there are things about a big company that I can assume, and maybe not fairly, but I assume about you as an employee that are maybe not fair at a small company, but are what people think. At a big company, I think you know how to handle yourself professionally. I think you dress professionally. I think you get exposure to processes and business processes and highly educated and qualified people, and you learn how to work the system, and you are exposed and networked with other people at other big companies. At a small company, I think you are a jack of all trades, wearer of many hats, someone who is required to wash the dishes on one day in the office kitchen and also close the big sale on the other days. My guess is that you're cutting corners in terms of the technology that you need sometimes and making sacrifices on other things and not staying in the fanciest of hotels and not flying business class and all these other things. So there's this prestige differential. And the problem is that this prestige differential will have magnified impacts along the way. So if I were to go from a small no-name company and a big named company to another job, what is my likelihood that I get, say, this role at a big company, a prestigious company, from this position as opposed to this position? It's probably going to be higher on this position, right? So if we're both applying for this position, they're probably going to say, this person came from a big company. They know how it works, and they were successful there, and they got great reviews and all fives on their reviews and all those types of things, and you're probably going to get this job. This person is probably going to have to settle for a slightly lower job. So the problem is with the trajectory of these two jobs along the way is not just the differential on the starting point of pay, but also the role that you're going to get long-term, right? The roles that you're going to get, you're going to always be a tier down, which is going to be a tier down in prestige and pay along the way. And so this is going to get magnified over time. In fact, I was just illustrating out based on exactly what I know in a spreadsheet. And one of the things that I did here is I just said, hey, over a 45-year career, you start your job at 2021, you work to 65, 66, 45-year career. I put $47,000 on one track, $58,000 on the other track, and I just adjusted each of those numbers over time for inflation, 3% increase. Let's say that's a raise you get, not even considering a promotion. When I was at big companies, there were times when you get a 5 or 10% promotion because, hey, that marketing project went extremely well. Hey, that portfolio you managed did extremely well, whatever, right? And not necessarily doubling your salary, but you could get some of these big pay bumps. And then, because there is job hopping, and people now are job hopping more, every 10 years, I did a 10% increase to the salary, assuming that you were jumping to a new company and getting a nice little bump in pay. However, I did an extra 10% for the chase job, saying, hey, this is a bigger job. You could probably get a 20% pay differential. Basically, you would get that differential for jumping the job, but also a little kicker because they're assuming you're coming from a good company, going to another good company. And when you jump from that other good, prestigious company, so if you go from Chase to HSBC to Goldman Sachs to whatever, right? These are going to be names that people know. And so you're going to get a little bit extra kicker for that. And so I did that every 10 years up to the 31st year. And then I just let it play out saying, hey, your last 15 years are going to be at a company. This is the stark difference between it. So I added up all of the annual salaries for track one, that consulting. That became a lifetime earnings of $4.9 million. Again, these numbers aren't adjusted for inflation. But on the chase track, it was $7.5 million. So millions of dollars more. Not just talking about a 10% long-term differential, 20% long-term differential. I'm talking about 5 versus $7.5 million. What would you rather have? I'll cut you a check right now. $5 million or $7.5 million? You take the $7.5 million. That is a huge differential. We're talking about millions of dollars more by making the right decision earlier. Now, if you think of investing, right, we talk about the power of compounding. The investing that you do early is the stuff that magnifies itself, that has the biggest impact. Don't forget about the career choices you make and those career choices that you make early. These are going to also have bigger impacts. Now, I have done some pivoting in my day and kind of moved back and went to bigger companies and tried to get on track again. But in all of those cases, anytime I actually moved to a bigger company, a larger company, got back into the AIP and the long-term incentive plans and all these other things, I never got in at where I thought I would have been. I always had to take a lesser role to get back into that track. And so I was always trailing where I think I could have been had I taken that Chase job originally. Now, I certainly respect Chase. I think they're a fantastic company, and there's certainly no guarantee that any job you take or any role or department that you join is going to be something that persists. But the funny thing about it is, and where it's still a regret for me, is that obviously Chase is a big banking industry juggernaut. But at the time, at least in 1999, and then they could have had a big footprint in credit cards, but I didn't see them as particularly strong in the credit card space. In fact, the name I personally remember at that time is MBNA. MBNA Bank, for whatever reason, had a ton of the branded credit card business. So if you went to the Sonics or got your branded Six Flags credit card or Cedar Point or Disney or Hyatt or Marriott or whatever, there was a good chance that it was branded by MBNA. For whatever reason, MBNA was huge. I had a bunch of MBNA credit cards, and I just remember they were really great at co-branding with people, and they were a name. I don't know where MBNA is anymore. I don't know what path they went to get acquired. I'm assuming that they were acquired by various people, but I just looked up the biggest U.S. credit card companies in America, the top 8 here, and first of all, MBNA is not on there anywhere. So I'm assuming they were acquired into one of these many. But guess who is on the top? Guess who is the largest credit card issuer in America? But last year, Chase, $602 billion. Pretty impressive for a company that at the time I was talking to them and being recruited by them and thinking about working with them. It was going to be a lot of work to get growth, a lot of work to penetrate into those co-branding situations, a lot of work to evaluate some of these smaller credit card companies to see who we could acquire to get those assets. But obviously, in the last 25 years, they did a bang-up job to go from wherever they were to the number one position. And that's one of the things I think Chase is known for. When you hear the word Chase, yes, some of the branches and stuff, but a lot of people will be like, hey, I've got the Chase Sapphire or the Business Inc. or whatever. They have so many credit cards. They're almost ubiquitous. Chase Quick Pay was ubiquitous for a while. So when I look back, I just think, hey, I could have potentially joined them. Probably gotten fired for being too fat and too ugly and too dumb. But if I had joined them and just stayed with them and forgotten about just holding on to some of the silly things that were here in Chicago that probably wouldn't have mattered in the long run, I would have kept my same friends. Now, again, my life recipe probably would have changed. I may not have married the same person. I certainly wouldn't live in the same place. My family may have relocated. I don't know what might have happened, but it's not Philly is the other end of the world by any means. It's just a short flight away. Maybe I would have gotten into the East Coast thing a little bit more. I don't know. But as I see my friends scattering to the winds, being less geographically centered around the Midwest themselves, and I'm still here, I can't help but think about what would have come or what I would have done if I had taken that job and even stayed there this whole time, not moving, where I would have been on AIP and salary and a role and all of those things. So basically what I'm telling you is that when you're thinking about your career, you want to think about those initial pay differentials. What are you getting paid? Are you taking a lower paying job right now? And is that really the best way to do it? Are you undervaluing what that target bonus would be in the other role and how that bonus can grow over time? But more importantly, are you undervaluing the perception of the company? A big company, a prestigious company, a name brand company, any name brand. If you are working there, I have some assumptions about you. If you are working at General Mills, the cereal company, and I don't know if you're packaging the cereal or you're an executive there, what I will say is I know that you know how to work at a big company at some level. But if you work at ABC Electronics down the street from here, or Ted's Mattress Store, or Chicago's #1 iPhone fix-it place, I don't know that you can thrive in a big corporate environment. I don't know if you have the connections. I don't know if you have the training or are familiar with the processes. I just don't know. You might be God's greatest gift. You might be the next best thing since sliced bread. But with experience at a bigger company, I can make some assumptions about you, which may or may not be fair, but that's just how it works. And if I'm at a big company, I'm more likely to hire you in coming from another big company. It is hard to go from a small financial services company to a big financial services company. It does happen, for sure. But it's easy to go from a big financial services company to a small financial services company. They want some of that big company exposure and leadership and knowledge. But what can you offer the big companies that they don't already have in talent and resources, What can you bring to the table for them other than labor? So that's just one of the things that I wanted to reflect on. I know that was my long-winded story. It's the first time I've ever really told it, but it's something that I have thought about many times over the years and what would be different. And you just have to envision what this other world would have been like. But if I could do it over again, I would have certainly taken the better paying job at the bigger company. And so while I'm not saying that is the right thing for everyone, my hope is that if you are trying to just stay within your comfort zone for reasons that might be selfish or really don't have any kind of material impact on you, try to picture yourself outside of that. Try to push your comfort zone. In terms of growth, in terms of becoming better people, we're always talking about pushing the boundaries of where we're comfortable. You may have to do that, especially when it comes to career, especially when it comes to packing up that U-Haul and driving across country and relocating, because some of those opportunities, even when they seem like small decisions, can have huge impacts over the course of your life. So hopefully that helps the next time you're thinking about a job, a career path, graduating from college. If you have questions about it, just let me know. But I hope that helps. I'll see you later.